I still remember the exact moment I realized my mother had been lying to me for 23 years. It wasn't dramatic, the way you see in movies. No shouting, no slamming doors, no dishes thrown against walls. It was quiet, painfully, unbearably quiet. We were sitting in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd taught me to bake bread when I was 7, where we'd laughed over burnt cookies and too thick frosting, where she'd held me when I cried over my first heartbreak. The afternoon light came through the window above the sink, catching dust particles in the air, making them dance like tiny, careless spirits. And in that light, with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking, watching it grow cold, she told me the truth about my father. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it really began. Not with the confession, but with the silence that came before it. The silence that shaped my entire life without me even knowing it. My name is Charlotte, though my mother always called me Charlie. I grew up in a small town in Oregon called Pinewood, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and your business, where the local diner serves the same menu it did 30 years ago, where the high school football games are the biggest events of the week, and where leaving feels like both a dream and a betrayal. My childhood was ordinary in the best way. Scraped knees and summer storms, school plays and Sunday dinners, riding bikes until the streetlights came on. But there was always something missing, something I couldn't name. A shadow that followed me, even on the brightest days. My father. I never knew him. That's what my mother told me from the time I was old enough to ask. From the moment I realized that other kids had 2 parents and I only had one. "He left before you were born, sweetheart," she'd say, her voice soft but final, like a door gently closing and locking. "It's just you and me, and that's enough, isn't it?" And for a long time, I believed her. I believed it was enough. My mother, Sarah, was everything. Fierce and tender, strong and vulnerable, sharp and soft all at once. She worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Mornings at the bakery on Main Street, where she'd come home smelling like cinnamon and yeast. Evenings cleaning offices downtown, where she'd return exhausted but still find the energy to ask about my day. She never complained. Not once. She sang while she worked, hummed old songs I didn't know the names of, Patsy Cline, Dolly Parton songs from a time before I existed. She made our tiny apartment above the hardware store feel like a castle, decorated with thrift store finds and homemade curtains she'd sewn herself. She read to me every night, her voice turning storybook characters into real people I could touch, making magic seem possible, even in our small, ordinary life. But as I grew older, the absence of my father became louder. Not because I needed him. I had my mother, and she was enough, she truly was. But because I want to understand. I wanted to know who he was, what he looked like, whether I had his eyes or his laugh or his way of tilting my head when I was thinking. I wanted to know why he left, and if he ever thought about me. If somewhere in the world there was a man who wondered what his daughter looked like, what her voice sounded like, whether she was happy. "Mom," I asked once when I was 12, sitting at our kitchen table doing homework, struggling with algebra, "what was he like? My dad?" She froze, just for a second, her hand hovering over the pot of spaghetti sauce she was stirring. Then she turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, a smile I would come to recognize over the years as her protection mechanism. "He was complicated, Charlie. Some people aren't meant to stay, but he gave me you, and that's the only thing that matters." It was always like that. Vague answers, gentle deflections, changing the subject. And I learned not to push, because every time I did, I saw something in her face. Not anger, but pain. Deep, old pain that had settled into her bones like winter cold. When I was in middle school, a girl named Jessica told me during lunch that her mom said my dad was probably in prison. "That's why your mom won't talk about him," she said with the casual cruelty only 12-year-old girls can manage. My mom said he probably did something bad. I went home crying that day, and my mother held me on the couch, stroking my hair, whispering that Jessica was wrong, that my father wasn't a bad man, just a lost one. "Some people get lost, Charlie," she said, "and sometimes they can't find their way back." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. When I was 16, I found a photograph that would change everything, though I didn't know it then. I wasn't snooping, not really. I was looking for my birth certificate for a school trip to Seattle, and my mother had told me it was in the lockbox under her bed. The box wasn't locked. It never was, which should have told me something. Gears should have made me wonder what she was really protecting. And inside, beneath insurance papers and old tax returns and my baby footprints from the hospital, I found it. A photograph, creased and faded, edges worn soft with time. He was young in the picture, maybe 25, with dark hair that fell across his forehead in a way that reminded me of myself. His eyes, my eyes, looked both kind and sad, like someone who'd seen too much too soon. He was smiling, but it was the kind of smile people wear when they're trying to be happy for the camera, when something inside them is breaking. He wore a flannel shirt unbuttoned over a white t-shirt, and his hands were in his pockets. In the background I could see pine trees and mountains, somewhere in Oregon I guessed, maybe near Mount Hood. On the back, in my mother's younger, rounder handwriting, it said, Michael. Before what? I sat on my mother's bedroom floor, holding that photograph with trembling hands, staring at this stranger who was somehow part of me. I traced his face with my finger, memorizing every detail. The shape of his jaw, the way his hair curled slightly at his temples, the dimple in his left cheek that I saw in my own mirror every day. Was this him? My father? And if so, why had she hidden him away like this, buried beneath paperwork and forgotten things like something shameful? I stared at that photo for what felt like hours, though it was probably only 20 minutes before I heard my mother's car pull up outside. I put the photo back exactly where I found it, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. I didn't ask my mother about it that night, or the next day, or ever. Some part of me knew that if I did, she'd find a way to explain it away, to make it disappear again, to tell me another gentle lie. And I wasn't ready for that. I wanted to hold on to the possibility a little longer, the possibility that somewhere out there this man existed and that maybe, just maybe, he thought about me too. But from that day forward, everything felt different. Every time my mother looked at me, I wondered if she saw him in my face. Every time she avoided talking about the past, I felt the weight of that photograph, that single word. Before I was born, before something terrible happened, before he became someone different. High school passed in a blur of trying to be normal while feeling fundamentally different from everyone around me. I made friends, Sarah and Melissa and Jake, good people who included me in their lives without asking too many questions. I joined the drama club, not because I wanted to act, but because I wanted to be someone else, anyone else, even for a few hours. I got good grades because my mother worked so hard to give me opportunities, and I couldn't bear to disappoint her. But I also started noticing things I'd never noticed before. The way my mother tensed whenever anyone asked about my father. The way she changed the subject when family came up. The way she never dated, never even mentioned being interested in anyone. She was 40 years old and beautiful, with red hair she got from her Irish grandmother and green eyes that sparkled when she laughed. Men asked her out sometimes. Bill from the hardware store, the UPS driver who delivered to the bakery, even our landlord once. She always said no, always with that same gentle smile that closed doors. "Don't you want to meet someone, Mom?" I asked her once when I was 17, watching her make dinner alone in our kitchen like she did every night. "I have everything I need," she said, kissing my forehead. "I have you." But I started to wonder if that was enough for her. If she'd given up her entire life, not just my father, but any chance at love, at partnership, at not being alone, for me. The guilt of that realization was heavy. I left home when I was 18, not because I wanted to escape, but because I needed to find myself. I got a scholarship to a college 3 hours away in Eugene, studied psychology because I was fascinated by why people do the things they do, why they lie and love and leave, why they carry secrets that slowly poison them from the inside out. My mother cried when I left, standing in the parking lot of our apartment building with her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, even though it was August. But she smiled through it, told me she was proud, told me to call every week, told me to remember that I could come home any time. "You're going to do great things, Charlie," she said, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. "I always knew you would." And I did. Every Sunday at noon, like clockwork, I called her. We talked about classes and weather and nothing important. She asked if I was eating enough, if I was sleeping, if I'd met anyone special. I told her small truths and smaller lies. Yes, I'm eating. Yes, I'm sleeping. No, no one's special. The truth was more complicated than that, but I'd learned from her how to keep certain things hidden. But the real truth was that I was unraveling. College was supposed to be about discovery, about becoming someone new, about finding out who you were when no one was watching. But all I felt was lost. I made friends, went to parties, studied hard, got good grades. I joined study groups and volunteered and did all the things you're supposed to do. But underneath it all, there was this hollowness, this sense that I was walking through my life instead of living it, like I was a ghost haunting my own existence. I dated a boy named Connor for 6 months during my sophomore year. He was kind and funny and studying environmental science. He took me hiking, taught me the names of trees, made me laugh in ways I hadn't laughed since I was a kid. And when he told me he loved me, sitting on a blanket watching the stars in the hills outside Eugene, I couldn't say it back. Not because I didn't care about him, but because I didn't know how. I didn't know what love was supposed to look like when it stayed, when it didn't disappear before you were even born. Connor left gently the way good people do. "You're not really here, Charlie," he said, and there were tears in his eyes. "It's like you're always somewhere else, looking for something I can't give you." He was right. I was looking for something. I just didn't know what yet. My junior year of college, I took a class called Family Systems and Trauma. The professor, Dr. Chen, was a small woman with grey hair and the sharpest eyes I'd ever seen. She could look at you and see everything you were trying to hide. One day she lectured about family secrets. "Secrets are like poison," she said, walking between the desks. "They don't just affect the person keeping them. They seep into every relationship, every interaction. Children grow up knowing something is wrong, even if they can't name it. They internalize the silence. They learn that some things are too dangerous to talk about." I sat frozen in my seat, my pen hovering over my notebook. "The secret keeper thinks they're protecting their loved ones," Dr. Chen continued. "But what they're really doing is teaching them that truth is dangerous, that love requires lies, that some parts of you are too shameful to be seen." After class, I stayed in my seat while everyone else filed out. Dr. Chen noticed, approached my desk. "Are you all right?" she asked. I looked up at her, this woman I barely knew, and felt tears burning in my eyes. "What if the secret keeper thinks they're doing the right thing?" I asked. "What if they think the truth would hurt more?" Dr. Chen sat down in the desk next to mine. "The truth always comes out eventually," she said gently. "And when it does, it brings all the pain of the original wound plus the pain of the betrayal. Better to hurt once with honesty than twice with lies." That night, I almost called my mother. I held my phone in my hand for 20 minutes, staring at her contact photo, a picture I'd taken of her laughing at my high school graduation. But I didn't call, because I was afraid of what I might say and even more afraid of what she might not. I graduated when I was 22 with honours and a degree that felt both meaningful and useless. I moved to Portland, got a job at a non-profit called Second Chances that helped at-risk youth navigate the foster care system and difficult home environments. It was good work, important work, the kind of work that mattered. I helped kids who'd been abandoned, neglected, betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect them. I listened to their stories, helped them find resources, advocated for them in ways no one had advocated for them before, and every single one of them reminded me of myself. Not because our circumstances were the same, my mother had loved me fiercely, had sacrificed everything for me, but because they all carried the same question I did. Why wasn't I enough? Why did someone choose to leave me? I was good at my job, maybe too good. My supervisor, Patricia, told me I was a natural, that I had a gift for connecting with these kids. What she didn't know was that it wasn't a gift, it was recognition. I saw myself in every confused, angry teenager who sat across from me. I visited my mother every few months, making the 3-hour drive back to Pinewood on long weekends. And each time I did, I noticed she was getting older. Not just in years, but in the way she moved, the way her shoulders curved forward slightly, the way she seemed smaller somehow, more fragile, like she was slowly disappearing. "Are you okay, Mom?" I asked her once, watching her struggle to open a jar of pickles, her hands shaking slightly. "I'm fine, sweetheart," she said, laughing it off in that way she had. "Just getting old. Happens to the best of us." But I knew it was more than that. There was a tiredness in her eyes, a heaviness in the way she carried herself, like she was holding something too heavy for too long. And I wondered if she was lonely, if all those years of raising me alone had taken more from her than I'd ever realised, if the weight of her secret was slowly crushing her. I started staying longer during my visits, helping her around the house, cooking meals together, watching old movies on her worn couch. We didn't talk about anything deep, we never did. But I tried to be present, to show her that I saw her, even if I couldn't yet bring myself to confront what I'd always known was there, lurking in the silence between us. It was during one of these visits in early spring when I was 23 that I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find my father, not to confront him, not to demand answers, not to rage at him for leaving, but just to see him, to know that he existed, that I came from somewhere real, that I was more than just the daughter of a woman with kind eyes and heavy secrets. I hired a private investigator. His name was Tom Morrison, a retired cop in his 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a no-nonsense attitude. His office was above a coffee shop in downtown Portland, cluttered with filing cabinets and photographs of what I assumed were his grandchildren. I gave him what little information I had, my mother's full name, the town where I was born, the approximate year my father would have left, my birthday. I showed him the photograph I'd secretly taken a picture of with my phone years ago, the image slightly blurry but still clear enough to see his face. Tom studied the photo for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Do you know his name?" he asked. "Michael," I said. "That's all I know. Michael. Before." Tom looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes. Pity, maybe, or understanding. "This might take some time," he said, "but I'll do my best. I've reunited families before. Sometimes it goes well. Sometimes it doesn't. You need to be prepared for anything." "I know," I said, though I didn't. Not really. "Why now?" he asked. "What changed?" I thought about that question. What had changed? Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe I just reached a point where the not knowing hurt more than the knowing could. "I'm tired of living in a story with missing pages," I finally said. Tom nodded slowly. "All right then, let's find those pages." The waiting was excruciating. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. Tom would call occasionally with updates. He'd found birth records, tracked down old addresses, interviewed people who might have known my mother and father back then. But nothing concrete, nothing definitive. I threw myself into work, taking on extra cases, staying late at the office. My colleagues started to worry. Patricia pulled me aside one day, her hand gentle on my shoulder. "Charlie, you can't save everyone," she said. "You'll burn out if you keep going like this." "I'm fine," I said, the same lie my mother had always told. Patricia gave me a look that said she didn't believe me. "Take some time off. Go somewhere. Rest. The kids will still be here when you get back." But rest felt impossible, because every quiet moment was filled with questions. What if Tom found him? What if he didn't? What if my father was dead? What if he was alive and didn't care? What if he had a whole other family, kids he'd actually stayed for, kids he'd chosen in a way he didn't choose me? The spiral of these thoughts was dizzying. 3 months after I'd hired Tom on a rainy Tuesday in June, he called me at work. "I found him," he said, his voice careful, measured. "But Charlie, there's something you need to know." My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. "What? Can we meet in person?" "I think it's better if I explain this face to face." We met at the same coffee shop below his office an hour later. The rain had stopped, leaving everything wet and glistening. I'd barely been able to focus on the drive over, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Tom was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a manila folder in front of him. He ordered black coffee. I ordered nothing. My hands were shaking too much to hold a cup, my stomach too twisted to even think about drinking anything. He slid the folder across the table. Your father's name is Michael Garrett. He's alive, lives in Bend, about an hour from here. He's a good man, from what I can tell. Married to a woman named Linda for 15 years. 2 kids, a boy and a girl, 14. 2 kids, half siblings I'd never met, never even knew existed. They'd grown up knowing their father, having him at their soccer games and school plays and breakfast tables. They'd grown up with the thing I'd always dreamed of. But here's the thing, Charlie, Tom continued, his voice gentle, like he was breaking bad news, which I guess he was. I did some digging into why he left. I talked to some people who knew your parents back then, and it's not what your mother told you. I stared at him, my mouth dry, unable to form words. He didn't leave, Tom said. He was forced out. Tom told me the story, piece by piece, detail by detail, pulling documents from the folder to show me proof. Court records, newspaper clippings, interviews he'd recorded with people who'd been there. My mother and Michael had been in love, real, deep, complicated love. They'd met when they were young, barely 20, at a 4th of July celebration in Pinewood. Michael had been working construction, trying to save money for community college. My mother had just finished her first year at a university in Salem, studying to be a teacher. They were from different worlds. My mother's family had money, owned the biggest furniture store in town, had a reputation to uphold. Michael's family was poor, lived in a trailer park on the edge of town, was known for trouble. Michael's older brother had been in and out of jail. His father had left years ago. His mother worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. But none of that mattered to them. They fell in love the way young people do. Completely, desperately, without reservation. My mother's parents, my grandparents, Thomas and Eleanor, who died in a car accident when I was 2, who I barely remembered, didn't approve. They made that clear from the beginning. Michael wasn't good enough, didn't have prospects, came from the wrong kind of family. They wanted better for their daughter. They wanted stability, security, someone with a degree and a future and a last name that meant something in their small town. My mother didn't care. She loved Michael. She told her parents she was going to marry him, that they were making plans, that she'd never felt this way about anyone. And then she got pregnant with me. She was 21, midway through her junior year of college. She told Michael first, terrified of what he'd say. He'd held her, Tom told me, tears in his eyes, and said it was the best news he'd ever heard. They'd figure it out together. He'd work more hours, save more money. They'd make it work because they loved each other. But when my mother told her parents, everything fell apart. They gave her an ultimatum: leave Michael, or they would cut her off completely. No money for school, no support, no family. They would tell everyone in town that she'd shamed them, ruined their reputation. They would make sure she couldn't come home there, couldn't use their name, couldn't access the trust fund her grandmother had left her. She would be completely, utterly alone. She was terrified, Tom said, showing me a letter he'd found written by my mother to a friend at the time. 21 years old, pregnant, being forced to choose between the man she loved and her entire safety net. My mother made a choice. She went to Michael and told him she didn't love him anymore. Told him she'd made a mistake. Told him she wanted to raise the baby alone, that he needed to leave town, that she never wanted to see him again. She lied to protect herself, to survive. Michael was devastated, Tom said quietly. By all accounts, he begged her to tell him what was really wrong, to let him help. But she kept lying. She told him over and over that she didn't want him, that he wasn't enough, that she'd never really loved him. So finally he left. He honoured her wishes. He didn't fight, didn't push, because he thought that's what she wanted, because he loved her enough to walk away if that's what she needed. My hands were trembling, tears streaming down my face. Tom pushed a box of tissues across the table. He never knew, Tom continued. He never knew she was forced to say those things. He never knew her parents had threatened her. And by the time your grandparents died and she could have reached out, could have told him the truth, too much time had passed. He'd moved on. He'd built a new life. He'd met Linda, had kids, created a family. And your mother, she'd built a life too, with you. And she couldn't bring herself to destroy what he'd built by showing up after all those years with the truth. I sat there frozen, the coffee shop noise fading into white static. People laughing, ordering drinks, living their normal lives while mine shattered into a million pieces. My mother had lied, not just about him leaving, but about everything. She'd built an entire narrative where she was the victim and he was the villain. She'd let me grow up thinking my father was a man who'd abandoned us, who hadn't wanted me, who'd chosen to walk away, and I'd believed it. For 23 years, I'd believed it. "There's more," Tom said gently. "Do you want to hear it?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure I could handle more. "Michael tried to find you, multiple times over the years. When you were 5, when you were 10, when you were 16. He hired investigators, put ads in newspapers, but your mother had changed both of your last names after her parents died. She made it nearly impossible for him to track you down, and eventually he stopped trying. His wife convinced him that maybe it was better to let sleeping dogs lie, that maybe your mother had her reasons for keeping you away from him." "Does he know you found him?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "No," Tom said. "I didn't make contact. That's your decision to make. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't face my apartment. Couldn't face the normal routines of my life when everything had just shifted beneath my feet. Instead, I drove. I got on Highway 26 and drove west toward the ocean, toward the edge of the world. I ended up in a tiny town called Manzanita, renting a room in a cheap motel that smelled like salt and old carpet. I spent the next 3 days walking the beach at dawn and dusk, watching the waves come in and go out, steady and relentless, indifferent to human pain. I thought about all the lies we tell to survive, all the choices we make that echo through decades, affecting people who haven't even been born yet. My mother had been young, scared, controlled by people who wielded their power and money like weapons. She'd made a choice, a terrible, desperate choice. And then she'd had to live with it. Live with the guilt of taking me away from my father. Live with the knowledge that she'd hurt someone who loved her. Live with the weight of a lie that grew heavier with every passing year. She'd raised me alone, worked herself to exhaustion, given me everything she could. She'd been a good mother, a great mother even. But the cost had been the truth. And now I had to decide what to do with it. I thought about calling Michael, driving to Bend, knocking on his door. "Hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm your daughter. The one you never got to meet. The one your first love kept from you." But something stopped me. Fear, maybe, or loyalty, or the realization that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. That meeting him wouldn't just affect me, it would affect his wife, his children, the life he'd built from the ashes of his first heartbreak. Did I have the right to destroy that? Even if it meant finally getting the answers I'd always wanted. On my 4th day at the beach, I called my mother. "Charlie?" She answered on the first ring, her voice thick with worry. "Where are you? I've been trying to reach you for days. Patricia called, said you hadn't shown up to work, and I'm fine, Mom," I said. "I'm at the coast. I needed to think." Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, "Think about what?" I watched a seagull land on the railing of my motel balcony, tilting its head at me like it was waiting for an answer too. "I know about Michael," I said. The silence that followed was so complete I thought she'd hung up, but then I heard her breath, shaky and uneven. "How?" she whispered. "I hired an investigator." "Oh God," her voice broke. "Charlie, I need to see you," I said. "We need to talk face to face." "I'll come to you," she said immediately. "Where are you?" "No," I said. "I'll come home to Pinewood. I'll be there tomorrow." "Charlie!" "Tomorrow, Mom." I hung up before she could say anything else. I drove back to Pinewood the next morning, taking back roads instead of the highway, prolonging the inevitable. The town looked exactly the same as it always did. The diner with its faded red awning, the hardware store where our apartment used to be above it, the bakery where my mother had worked for so many years before her arthritis got too bad. Everything familiar, everything the same, while everything had changed. My mother was waiting on the porch of her small house on Maple Street, the house she'd bought after my grandparents died and left her everything. She looked small, fragile, like a strong wind could blow her away. Her red hair was mostly grey now, pulled back in a bun. She wore a cardigan even though it was June, like she was cold from the inside out. She stood when she saw me, her hands clasped in front of her. "Hi, Mom," I said. "Hi, baby." Her voice cracked. We went inside. The house smelled like lavender and old books, comfortable and sad at the same time. She'd made tea, set out cookies she'd baked that morning, even though her hands probably hurt. Always taking care of everyone else, even when her world was falling apart. We sat at her kitchen table, the same one from our old apartment, scarred and worn, witness to 1,000 meals and conversations and silences. "Tell me everything," I said. "No more lies, Mom. I need the truth." And she did. She told me everything. She told me about meeting Michael at that 4th of July celebration, how he'd made her laugh in a way no one ever had before, how he'd looked at her like she was the most amazing thing he'd ever seen. She told me about falling in love despite her parents' disapproval, about stolen moments and secret meetings, about planning a future together. She told me about getting pregnant, about the joy she'd felt despite the fear about Michael's reaction when she told him. "He cried," she said, tears streaming down her own face. "He was so happy, Charlie. He wanted you so much." She told me about her parents' ultimatum, about the horrible, impossible choice they'd forced her to make. "I was so scared," she whispered. "So young. I didn't know how I'd survive without them. I didn't know how to be strong yet." She told me about lying to Michael, about the look on his face when she said she didn't love him, about how something in her had died that day. "I've regretted it every single day since," she said. "Every single day I've wondered what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to choose differently." She told me about the years after, about working 2 jobs, about raising me alone, about every time she looked at me and saw Michael's eyes staring back at her. "You look so much like him," she said, touching my face, "especially when you smile. It used to break my heart." She told me about the times Michael had tried to find us, about the investigators who'd come asking questions, about how she'd hidden, changed our names, made us disappear. "I told myself I was protecting you," she said, "that knowing him would only confuse you, hurt you. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. I was a coward." She told me about the guilt that lived in her chest like a stone, about the nights she couldn't sleep, about standing over my crib when I was a baby and crying, apologizing to both of us, me for what she'd taken from me, Michael for what she'd taken from him. "I wanted to tell you," she said, her voice breaking completely. "So many times I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd hate me. Afraid you'd think I was a monster. Afraid you'd leave and never come back." We sat in silence for a long time, the tea going cold between us. Outside, I could hear children playing, someone mowing their lawn, a dog barking, normal sounds. Life continuing in its ordinary way while we sat in the wreckage of decades-old lies. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked, her voice small, terrified. I looked at my mother. This woman who'd sacrificed everything for me, who'd worked herself to the bone, who'd loved me fiercely even while carrying this unbearable secret. I looked at her and saw not just the woman who'd lied to me, but the scared 21-year-old girl who'd made an impossible choice. I saw both, and I didn't know how to reconcile them. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know if I'm ready to meet him. I don't know if I ever will be. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know anything anymore." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. Whatever you decide, Charlie, I'll understand. I've taken enough from you. I won't take your choices too." "I need time," I said, standing up. "I need space to figure this out." "Of course," she said. "Take all the time you need." I walked to the door, then turned back. She was still sitting at the table, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, looking like she was disappearing. "Mom," I said. She looked up, hope and fear warring in her eyes. "I don't hate you," I said. "I'm angry, I'm hurt, I'm confused, but I don't hate you." She let out a sob, covering her mouth with her hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for that." I drove back to Portland in a daze. That night, lying in my bed staring at the ceiling, I pulled out my phone and looked at the information Tom had given me. Michael Garrett's address in Bend, his phone number. A recent photo Tom had managed to take from a distance, an older version of the man in that faded photograph, grey, touching his temples now, laugh lines around his eyes. He was loading groceries into an SUV, a teenage boy helping him, both of them laughing about something. My half-brother, a stranger who shared my blood, who'd grown up with the father I never had. I could drive there tomorrow, show up at his door, introduce myself, finally fill in the missing pieces of my story. But I didn't. Not that night, or the next, or the next. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I went back to work, but I was barely present. Patricia noticed, of course. She pulled me into her office one afternoon, concern written all over her face. "Charlie, what's going on?" she asked. "You're not yourself." I almost told her everything, almost let it all spill out, the lies, the father I'd never known, the impossible decision I was facing. But instead I just shook my head. "Family stuff," I said. "I'm working through it." She studied me for a long moment. "Take a leave of absence if you need to. Your job will be here when you're ready." "Thank you," I said. "But I need to work. I need the distraction." What I didn't tell her was that work was the only thing keeping me sane. Because when I was listening to a 15-year-old talk about her mother's addiction, or helping a 17-year-old navigate the foster care system, I wasn't thinking about my own mess. I wasn't spiraling into questions that had no good answers. My mother called every few days, tentative, careful. "Just checking in," she'd say. "Just wanted to hear your voice." We didn't talk about Michael. We didn't talk about the lies. We talked about weather and work and nothing that mattered, dancing around the giant chasm that had opened between us. I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Rachel Kim, and she had a calm presence that made me feel like I could say anything. I told her everything about the photograph, about Tom's investigation, about my mother's confession. "What do you want, Charlotte?" she asked during our third session. "I don't know," I said. "I want to not be angry at my mother. I want to meet my father. I want none of this to have happened. I want to go back to not knowing." "You can't unknow something," she said gently. "You can only decide how to move forward with the knowledge you have." "But what if there's no right answer?" I asked. "What if every choice I make hurts someone?" "That's life," she said. "We rarely get choices where no one gets hurt. We just have to decide which hurt we can live with." 3 months after my mother's confession, I made a decision. I was going to write Michael a letter. Not show up at his door unannounced, not call him out of the blue, not disrupt his life without warning. But write him a letter, give him the choice of whether to respond. Let him decide if he wants to open this door. I spent 2 weeks writing that letter. I must have gone through 50 drafts, crumpling pages and starting over, trying to find the right words. How do you introduce yourself to someone who doesn't know you exist? How do you tell someone their first love kept a secret that shaped both your lives? In the end, I kept it simple. "Dear Michael, my name is Charlotte. I'm 23 years old and I live in Portland. I was born in Pinewood on March 15th to Sarah Miller. I'm your daughter. I know this must be a shock. I'm sorry to reach out like this, sorry if it disrupts your life. But I recently learned the truth about why you left, about what my mother told you, about the choice she was forced to make. I'm not writing to accuse you of anything, or to ask for anything, or to cause problems. I'm just writing because I think you deserve to know that I exist, that I'm here, that you didn't abandon me, you were lied to. If you want to meet, I'd like that. If you don't, I understand. This is your choice. Whatever you decide, I want you to know. I don't blame you. I never have. Not really. I just wanted you to know the truth." Charlotte, I included my phone number and email address. I addressed the envelope to his home in Bend, and then I held on to it for another week, carrying it in my purse, taking it out and looking at it, wondering if I was making a mistake. Finally, on a Saturday morning in September, I drove to the post office and mailed it before I could change my mind. Then I waited. The waiting was excruciating in a different way than before. Before, I'd been waiting for information. Now I was waiting for a response that might never come. Every day I checked my email obsessively. Every time my phone rang, my heart jumped. A week passed, then 2, then 3. "Maybe it got lost in the mail," my roommate Jenna suggested. "Or maybe he needs time to process. Or maybe he doesn't want anything to do with me," I said. "Maybe he's happy with the family he has and doesn't want a grown daughter showing up out of nowhere." "Stop catastrophizing," Jenna said. "Give him time." On day 23, my phone rang. Unknown number. My hands shook as I answered. "Hello? Charlotte?" The voice was male, deep, uncertain. This is Michael Garrett. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, just stood frozen in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear. "Are you there?" he asked. "I'm here," I managed. Silence for a moment. Then, "I got your letter. Okay, I've read it probably 100 times," he said, and I could hear emotion in his voice, thick and raw. I don't even know where to start." "Me neither," I admitted. Another silence. Then he said, "Is it true, what you said about Sarah? About her parents?" "Yes," I said. "I hired an investigator. He found proof, court documents, testimonies from people who were there. She told me everything." I heard him let out a shaky breath. "All these years," he said. "All these years," I thought. "I thought she didn't want me, that I wasn't good enough." "You were good enough," I said, tears streaming down my face. "She loved you. She was just scared." We talked for 2 hours that first call. He told me about his life, about Linda, his wife, about his kids, Emma and Tyler. He told me about the years after he left Pinewood, about how broken he'd been, about how long it took him to put himself back together. He told me about the times he'd tried to find us, about how he'd given up hope of ever knowing me. "I thought about you every day," he said. "Every single day. I wondered what you looked like, what kind of person you were, if you were happy. I tried to find you so many times, but it was like you disappeared off the face of the earth." "Mom changed our names," I said, "after my grandparents died." "I know that now," he said. "Your letter explained everything, but for years I thought maybe she really did hate me that much, that she wanted to make sure I could never be part of your life." "She was wrong," I said. "She knows that now. She's carrying a lot of guilt." "She should," he said, and there was an edge of bitterness in his voice. Then he sighed. "I'm sorry. That's not fair. I don't know what it was like for her. I just know what it was like for me." "I know," I said, "and I'm sorry for all of it." "You have nothing to be sorry for," he said firmly. "You're the innocent one in all this. You didn't ask to be caught in the middle of our mess." Before we hung up, he asked if I wanted to meet. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Yes, I do." We met 2 weeks later at a coffee shop halfway between Portland and Bend. I arrived early, too nervous to eat or drink, just sat at a table by the window watching cars pull into the parking lot, wondering if each one held him. And then he walked in, and I knew him immediately. Even after all these years, even though he was older, greyer, there was no mistaking him. He had my eyes, or I had his. We had the same way of tilting our heads when we were uncertain, the same slight dimple in the left cheek. He saw me and stopped, just stood there for a moment staring. Then he walked over slowly, like he was approaching something fragile that might shatter. "Charlotte?" he said. "Hi," I said, standing on shaky legs. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then he pulled me into a hug, and I felt him shaking, felt his tears on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry for all of it." "It wasn't your fault," I said, crying too. "You didn't know." We sat and talked for hours. He showed me pictures of Emma and Tyler, told me stories about them, about his life. I told him about growing up with my mother, about my work, about who I'd become without him. "You're amazing," he said, looking at me with such warmth, such pride. "Your mother did a good job raising you, even if she made mistakes." "She did the best she could," I said, and I realized I meant it. Before we parted, he asked if I'd be willing to meet his family. "Only if you're comfortable," he said quickly. "I know it's complicated, but Linda knows about you now. I told her everything after I got your letter. And the kids, they're curious. They have a sister they never knew about." "I'd like that," I said. "But maybe slowly?" "Slowly is good," he agreed. "We have time now, all the time in the world." That was 8 months ago. Since then, I've met Michael's family. Linda was kind, welcoming in a careful way. She'd been hurt to learn about the secret Michael had carried for so long, but she understood. Emma and Tyler were curious, excited, treating me like I was something exotic and interesting rather than a disruption to their lives. We get together once a month now, sometimes at their house in Bend, sometimes in Portland. It's still strange, still new, but it's good. Michael sends me texts about random things, articles he thinks I'd find interesting, jokes, pictures of things that remind him of me. He's trying to make up for lost time, I think, trying to be the father he never got to be. And I'm letting him. Slowly, carefully, but I'm letting him in. My mother and I are rebuilding too. It's harder with her, more complicated, because the betrayal runs deeper, but I'm trying. We have dinner together every week now, and we're learning how to talk to each other honestly without the weight of secrets between us. She asked once if I hated her for what she'd done. No, I said. I don't hate you. I'm angry sometimes and hurt, and I wish things had been different. But I also understand that you were young and scared and doing what you thought you had to do. I can't hate you for being human. She cried when I said that, held my hand across the table. You're more forgiving than I deserve. She said, maybe, I agreed. But forgiveness isn't about what people deserve. It's about what we need to move forward. Michael and my mother have talked once since everything came out. It was brief, awkward, painful. They apologised to each other, acknowledged the hurt they'd both carried. I don't know if they'll ever truly reconcile, but at least they've started the process. I'm still in therapy with Dr. Kim. I still work at Second Chances, still help kids navigate impossible situations. But now I do it with a different perspective, because I understand now that families are complicated, that love doesn't always look the way we think it should, that sometimes people make terrible choices for complicated reasons. I understand that my mother loved me enough to work 2 jobs and sacrifice her youth and carry the weight of her secret alone. And I understand that my father loved me enough to respect what he thought was my mother's choice, even though it broke him. I understand that I'm the product of both their love and their mistakes, and that I get to decide how that shapes me. Last week, Emma, my half-sister, asked me if I ever wished things had been different. We were sitting on Michael's back porch, watching Tyler practice basketball in the driveway. Emma is 14, thoughtful, with dark hair like our father and a curious mind that reminds me of myself at that age. Of course, I said. I wish I'd known your dad growing up. I wish I'd known you and Tyler. I wish my mom hadn't been put in an impossible position. I wish a lot of things. But, Emma prompted, because she's smart enough to know there was a but coming. But I also think everything that happened made me who I am, I said. And I kind of like who I am, even if the path here was messy. Emma nodded, thinking about that. Tyler and I were talking, she said, and we think it's cool. Having a sister, I mean, even if it's weird. It is weird, I agreed, but good weird. Good weird, she repeated, smiling. I still have the photograph, the one I found when I was 16. It sits on my nightstand now, next to a newer photo, one we took last month, all of us together. Michael and Linda, Emma and Tyler, me, a family assembled from broken pieces, imperfect but real. My mother isn't in that photo, but she has her own on my nightstand too, one I took of her last week, laughing over something silly at dinner. Her eyes are lighter now than they've been in years, like a weight has been lifted. She's still carrying guilt, still wishing she could change the past, but she's learning to forgive herself, the way I'm learning to forgive her. Because the truth is, we're all just doing our best. My mother, my father, me. We're all just trying to survive the choices we make, the circumstances we're born into, the love we lose and find and lose again. And maybe that's enough. Maybe forgiveness isn't about forgetting or condoning or even understanding completely. Maybe it's just about recognizing that we're all human, all flawed, all carrying weight we never asked for, all doing our best to love each other despite our mistakes. I think about my grandparents sometimes, Thomas and Eleanor, who I barely remember, who died when I was too young to understand. I wonder if they knew what they were doing when they gave my mother that ultimatum. If they understood the ripples their choice would create, the lives it would shape, the pain it would cause. I like to think they didn't. I like to think they genuinely believed they were protecting their daughter, even if they were wrong, because the alternative, that they knew and didn't care, is too sad to consider. Dr. Kim says that's compassion. You're extending empathy even to people who hurt you, she told me. That's growth. Maybe it is. Or maybe I'm just tired of being angry, tired of carrying bitterness, tired of letting the past poison my present. Last month I went back to Pinewood for the first time in a while, walked the streets I'd grown up on, visited the diner where I'd had countless meals with my mother, drove past the apartment above the hardware store where we'd lived when I was young. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. The town that had felt like the entire world when I was a child now seemed tiny, contained, almost quaint. I wondered how my mother had stood it, raising me here alone, carrying her secret through these small streets where everyone knew everyone. I stopped by the cemetery where my grandparents are buried. I'd only been once before. For the funeral I barely remember. Their graves are side by side, marked with simple stones. I stood there for a while, trying to feel something. Anger, maybe, or resentment. But all I felt was sadness. Sadness for all of us, for my grandparents who tried to control their daughter's life out of fear, for my mother who'd been caught between love and survival, for my father who'd been lied to and cast aside, for me who'd grown up with a hole I didn't understand. I forgive you, yeah, I said out loud to their graves. I don't know if you deserve it, but I forgive you anyway. The wind rustled the trees above me, and for a moment I felt lighter. There are still hard days. Days when I'm angry at my mother all over again. Days when I look at Emma and Tyler and feel jealous of the childhood they had with their father. Days when I wonder what my life would have been like if everyone had just been honest from the beginning. But there are good days too. Days when Michael texts me good morning. Days when Emma calls to tell me about her day. Days when my mother and I cook together and laugh like we used to. Days when I feel grateful for the family I have now, complicated and patchwork as it is. I'm learning that life isn't about the absence of pain. It's about what we do with it. We can let it harden us, turn us bitter and closed, or we can let it soften us, make us more compassionate, more understanding of how difficult it is to be human. I'm choosing the latter. Or trying to, anyway. Some days I succeed better than others. A few weeks ago, Michael asked if I wanted to come to Tyler's basketball game. You don't have to, he said quickly. I know it's a lot being around the family, but I thought you might like to be there. I went, sat in the bleachers with Linda and Emma, cheered when Tyler made a basket, felt oddly normal despite the strangeness of it all. After the game, Tyler came over, sweaty and grinning. Did you see that three-pointer? He asked. I did, I said. It was great. Thanks, Charlotte, he said, and then, almost shyly, thanks for coming. Such a small thing, but it meant everything. Later, as we were leaving, Michael walked me to my car. Thank you for being here, he said. I know this whole situation is complicated. It is, I agreed, but it's also good. Weird, but good. He smiled. Good weird. Emma said the same thing. She's smart, I said, like her sister, he said, and I felt my eyes sting with tears. He hugged me goodbye, and I drove home feeling full in a way I hadn't felt before. Not complete. I don't know if anyone is ever truly complete, but fuller. Like pieces of me that had always been missing were slowly being found. I called my mother when I got home. Hi, sweetheart, she answered. How was the game? She asks now. She doesn't avoid talking about Michael or his family. She's trying, in her way, to make amends, to show me she's not threatened by my relationship with them. It was good, I said. Tyler's really good at basketball. He gets that from Michael, she said quietly. He was always athletic. It's still strange hearing her talk about him, but it's getting easier. Mom, I said. Yeah? I love you. Silence. Then, I love you too, baby, so much. I know, I said. I've always known. That's what I've learned through all of this, that love is complicated, messy, imperfect, that you can love someone and be angry at them at the same time, that you can forgive without forgetting, that family isn't just about blood or history, it's about choice, about who you keep letting in even when they've hurt you. My mother made terrible choices, but she also loved me fiercely. My father missed my entire childhood, but he's here now. My half-siblings are strangers who are becoming family. My grandparents hurt everyone, but they were also just scared people trying to protect what they thought mattered. We're all just scared people, really, trying to protect ourselves, trying to love each other, trying to survive the impossible choices life throws at us. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the point isn't to have a perfect story with neat resolutions and happy endings. Maybe the point is to keep showing up. Keep trying, keep choosing love even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I'm 24 now. My birthday was last month, and for the first time in my life, I spent it with both my parents. We didn't all sit down to dinner together. That's still too much, too complicated. But Michael took me to lunch, and my mother made me dinner. and I felt celebrated in a way I never had before. Michael gave me a photo album he'd made. "I know I wasn't there for most of your life," he said, "but I want you to have this. Pictures of me at different ages so you can see where you came from, and some blank pages at the end for pictures of us, the family we're building now." I cried when I opened it. Pictures of him as a baby, a child, a teenager. Pictures that showed me where my smile came from, where my hands came from, where my laugh came from. My mother gave me a different kind of gift, a journal she'd kept when she was pregnant with me. "I want you to understand," she said, "how much I wanted you, how much I loved you from the very beginning, even when I was terrified." I read it that night, sitting in my apartment, tears streaming down my face. Page after page of her hopes and fears, her love for me, her pain over Michael, her desperate wish that she was making the right choices. "I'm so scared," one entry read, "but when I feel her move inside me, I know it's all worth it. Whatever happens, whatever I have to do, I'll protect her. I'll give her everything I have." And she did. In her imperfect, flawed way, she did. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if my relationship with Michael will continue to grow, or if it will plateau at this comfortable distance. I don't know if my mother and I will fully heal, or if there will always be a small scar between us. I don't know if Emma and Tyler will truly feel like siblings, or if we'll always be something slightly less than that. But I'm okay with the not knowing now. I'm okay with the uncertainty, the messiness, the imperfection of it all, because the alternative, the silence, the secrets, the lies, that was worse. That was suffocating. At least now I can breathe. At least now I know the truth, even if the truth is complicated and painful and doesn't resolve neatly. At least now I have a choice about how to move forward, instead of being trapped in a story someone else wrote for me. I still work at Second Chances. I still help kids navigate impossible situations, still listen to their stories of abandonment and betrayal and complicated family dynamics. But now I do it with more compassion, more understanding. Because I get. I understand what it's like to be caught between love and anger, between forgiveness and resentment. I understand what it's like to want answers that don't exist, to want things to be simple when they're irredeemably complex. How do you know when to forgive someone? A girl named Jasmine asked me last week. She's 16, in foster care because her mother chose drugs over her. I thought about that question, thought about my own journey, my own struggle. I don't think it's about knowing, I finally said. I think it's about choosing. Every day you choose whether to hold on to the anger or let it go. Some days you choose anger, and that's okay. Some days you choose forgiveness, and that's okay too. Eventually, you choose forgiveness more days than anger, and one day you realize the anger doesn't own you anymore. Jasmine nodded slowly. Is it hard? Forgiving? The hardest thing I've ever done, I said honestly, but also the most freeing. My mother is teaching me to bake her mother's bread recipe, the one her mother taught her, the one that's been passed down for generations. We stand in her kitchen every Sunday morning now, our hands in dough, flour dusting our aprons, talking about everything and nothing. Your grandmother, she said last week, she would have loved you. I wish you could have known her better. Tell me about her, I said. And she did. Not just the sanitized stories, but the real ones. About how her mother had been difficult, controlling, afraid. About how she'd loved deeply but showed it poorly. About how she'd made mistakes that shaped generations. She was trying her best, my mother said. Like all of us. Like all of us. I echoed. We shaped the dough in silence for a while, the rhythm familiar and comforting. I'm proud of you, my mother said suddenly, for handling all of this with such grace, for forgiving me when I didn't deserve it, for being brave enough to find your father, for being better than me. I'm not better than you, I said. I'm just different, and I had a good teacher. She looked at me, tears in her eyes. I love you, Charlie. I love you too, Mom. The bread rose in the oven, filling the house with warmth and the smell of home. And for a moment, everything felt almost perfect. Not quite, never quite, but close enough. The weight of silence is heavy. I know that now. It's a weight that can crush you slowly, quietly, without you even realizing it. It shapes how you see the world, how you see yourself, how you move through life. But the weight of truth is heavy too. It's painful and complicated and doesn't come with easy answers. The difference is this: the weight of silence gets heavier with time. It compounds, grows, becomes unbearable. The weight of truth gets lighter, not immediately, not easily, but gradually, because truth at least gives you something to work with, something to heal from, something to build on. I'm building now. A family from broken pieces, a life from honest foundations, a future that isn't determined by the lies of the past. It's messy and imperfect, and sometimes it hurts, but it's mine. It's real, it's true, and that's enough. If this story touched something in your heart, well, I'd love for you to leave a small whisper in the comments below. Maybe you've carried secrets too. Maybe you've learned to forgive when it seemed impossible. Maybe you're still trying to find your way through the silence. Whatever your story is, you're not alone. We're all carrying weight. We're all doing our best. We're all trying to love each other despite our mistakes, despite our flaws, despite the impossible situations we find ourselves in. And sometimes that's the bravest thing we can do. Just keep trying. Keep choosing love. Keep choosing truth, even when it hurts. If you'd like to listen to more stories like this, stories about ordinary people carrying extraordinary weight, about forgiveness and healing and the complicated beauty of being human, just stay close and subscribe. Until next time, this is Olivia, whispering to your heart. Remember, you are stronger than your secrets. You are more than your mistakes, and you deserve to live in the light of truth, no matter how painful that light might be. Take care of yourselves, and take care of each other. Good night.